So just within the last hour, I was actually at Chili's and I met this man here in Champaign, Illinois. And he was kind of a redneck, kind of angry about something at work, and then he was bringing up something about Donald Trump and told me something about how basically our votes aren't direct ballot votes, but we essentially vote for someone else who then votes for us, I guess representing the state or something. And then in the mix, I basically responded to him in a way where I said that, well, even if we had a ballot vote, that would not represent the most wanted candidate. You heard me correctly. If you have a ballot vote, unless there are only two candidates, 1 and 2, then it does not necessarily represent the most wanted candidate. So as soon as we add a third candidate in here, it is actually possible that the most wanted candidate by the people will not be voted first. In fact, could be voted last. But the least wanted candidate actually can also be voted first. Given just 3 candidates, I can prove this. And so I began to prove it to him, basically explaining to him verbally, and then I guess he just refused and did not want to listen to me, and pretty much stated that I didn't know what I was talking about, and that a ballot vote in which everyone casts their first vote definitely does represent the most wanted candidate by the people. And so I will show you how incorrect he was, and I will actually prove it to you on paper, and that way everyone can see, just in case there are other people confused about this, why a ballot vote actually does not really work. So we're going to start off, and we're going to have 3 groups of people. So we're going to have a group of people. We're gonna draw it like a pie chart, pretty much. Let's draw it in about thirds. So let's draw this piece a little bit bigger than the other pieces, so that the sizes of these pieces are not exactly the same. Okay, so we have 3 candidates 1, 2, and 3, and then we have 3 groups, and we'll call them A, B, and C. Okay. So group C is the biggest, and so they're going to be more than 33, or 1/3 of the population. And so we'll just say that they're 40% of the population here. Okay. And then we're going to say that group A is the smallest of the 3 groups, and group B is going to be right in between there. And groups A and B are going to be very similar in size. So group B is going to be, let's say 31% of the population, and group A is going to be 29%. Okay, so a ballot vote, what does it represent precisely? Well, it represents precisely the majority of first votes. And so my claim is that the majority of first votes does not equal the most wanted candidate, because first votes is not enough information to get what the most wanted candidate is. And so we want to look at the entire population, and we want to actually look at what their first, second, and third choices for votes will be. And just to keep this simple, we're going to assume that A, B, and C are precisely the same, in how they want their 3 candidates. All 3 of their orders of votes. So we're going to say everyone in Group A actually would really prefer candidate 1 as their first choice. They really like candidate 1. Candidate 1 is a really strong guy. He's, I guess he's conservative, we'll pretend, and we'll pretend that he's very, just like kind of a safe bet. He doesn't want to do anything too risky, but he's kind of just a really safe bet. He has a really kind of conservative, I guess, set of ideals or something like that. So we'll just pretend candidate A is really safe or something. And then we'll just say that everyone in Group A, every single person in Group A, we're going to assume that if they had a second choice for their candidate, if let's assume for some reason candidate 1 was no longer in the competition, they would definitely choose candidate 2, no matter what, before candidate 3. So candidate 3 is their last choice. They definitely do not want candidate 3 to win. They'd rather have either candidate A, candidate 1, or candidate 2 win the election. Okay, so let's look at Group B. Okay, so Group B, Group B is a little more, let's say they're a little more risky. They're a little more liberal. They're a little more, they want to try new things or something. I don't want to get into any specific ideals or something, but let's say that they think that candidate 2 is actually a really good choice. In fact, it's their first choice. And then their second choice for candidate C would actually be candidate 1 again, because candidate 3 is kind of scares them, even though they're, the risky type. They think that candidate 3, there's something wrong with candidate 3. He seems to want to, I don't know, just give this like lower 40% of the population just free everything. Like they get free anything. They can just walk into a Walmart and take whatever they want. We'll just pretend that that's the case. So they don't want candidate 3. Definitely not. Okay, so this is already 60% of the population who definitely would prefer both either candidate 1 or 2 to candidate 3. So already candidate 3 is in a minority as far as how much he's wanted as the president. Now let's say Group C, they love candidate 3. Group C just they'll do anything to have candidate 3. He's definitely their first choice. 100% for sure. Candidate 3 is hands down. Group C just loves him. And then let's say Group C is like, well, we don't know. I guess we'll go with I guess they like candidate 2 more. We'll assume that everyone in Group C likes candidate 2 more than they like candidate 1. But at this point, it doesn't really matter too much. So yeah. So they want. Let's see here. So let's actually say that if these people, let's say they have a choice, and in this case, they have life decisions, and they know they can either be lazy and just kind of do the best that they can during their lives, and then they don't really care what happens as long as they can get into Walmart for free. But if it so happens that they do kind of can't get their candidate, like they do care about their country and want to make sure it's taken care of, they do kind of think about, well, what is the best option for the country as a whole, and they kind of make that their second decision. So I actually swapped, I realized that I swapped the numbers I was looking at here for the 31 and 29% for what I'm trying to get at. So I think I have to put actually have to change this really quick right here. This is going to be, they want candidate 1 more than they want candidate 2. We'll just go with that, because you'll see later on, because I'm not just proving that the least wanted candidate gets voted first, but I'm going to show that the most wanted candidate in this situation also would be the last chosen one according to the ballot vote. Now, given all this information, the ballot vote just observes this information right here. It completely ignores this information. Completely. Okay? So, now we're going to actually look at candidates 1, 2, and 3, and we're going to actually create what's called a graph, and we're going to compare these candidates with each other based on what the population decides and how much they want one candidate over the other. And we'll go with that. So, what we're going to do is we're going to start with candidate 1, and we're going to look at Group A. And Group A represents 29% of the population. So 29% of the population prefer candidate 1 to candidate 2. So we're going to draw an arrow here, and we're going to just say 29%. Okay, so that's already 29%. The arrow means that where it's coming from, it's preferred over where it's pointing to. Okay, so 29% also prefer candidate 2 to candidate 3. Okay, so we're going to put a 29% here. Okay, and then we can't forget this. We also have to remember that, well, 29% also prefer 1 to 3. Now you can either infer that from these arrows, or I guess you could also kind of put a dotted graph or whatever. As long as it adds up properly, there's a way to say that 29% of the population prefer candidate 1 to candidate 3. Okay, so let's do that for the rest of them. So for B, we're going to do that again. So 2 to 1, we're going to say that 31% prefer candidate 2 to 1. And then 31% actually prefer 1 to 3. Okay? And then we can also do a dotted line here, and we can say that, well, indirectly, 31% prefer candidate 2 to 3. That's a correct statement, that 31% of the population prefers candidate 2 to 3. Now, if you just look at the graph how it is right now, you can notice that there's a different sum for each node here. There's a different total going on for how many arrows that are coming in and how many arrows going out. You'll notice that there's already a 60% coming into 3 here. We're going to ignore the dotted lines because they're kind of implied by these other lines. So either if you just look at the dotted lines or if you just look at the solid lines, 60% is already going into 3. Okay. And 0 is coming out of 3. So that means that 60% of the population prefer all candidates above 3 and prefer 3 above no other candidates. It basically is what that's saying. So we're going to look at candidate or population group C. So we're going to look at they prefer candidate 3 over candidate 1. So we're going to put an arrow here. And this one is 40%. Okay. And then we're going to look at 1 to 2, which is 40% here. Okay. And then we're going to look at 3 to 2, which is just an indirect from those other two. like that. It's not necessary to draw that one, but I'm just adding it in to kind of show that 40% in fact prefer candidate 3 over candidate 2. Okay, so let's look at who wins the majority vote first. Okay, so candidate C, or candidate 3 actually, wins with a 40% population vote. Candidate, let's see here, candidate A loses, no, candidate 1 loses in last with a 29%. Okay, so 3 wins with a 40%. Candidate 1 loses in last place with a 29%. Of course, candidate 2 is the other candidate involved, but he didn't win or lose. Well, he lost, but he didn't get last place. But what's funny is I'm going to show you that actually candidate 1 was wanted most, and candidate 3 was wanted least. Okay, so if we look at this graph here, if we look between 1 and 3, and we add up all these percentages, well, we have 60% going into 3 and 40% going out. So that means that candidate 3, and we're going to list this off here, so 1, 2, and 3. Candidate 3 has a negative 20% of the population preference. So that means that of comparing between candidate 3 and other candidates, basically 20% more of the total population preferred not to have candidate 3 than the ones that did prefer to have candidate 3 over the other choices. Okay, so let's look at candidate 2. So of all the solid lines going into candidate 2, we want to sum up the ones coming in and the ones going out, and it looks like the 29s cancel, leaving us with, let's see here, 40 going in and 31 going out. So that's 9% negative. Okay, and then for candidate 1, we have 31 going in, 31 coming out. So those cancel. And then we have 40 going in and 40 going out, and those cancel. But then here we have a 29 going out. So actually candidate 1 has a plus 29% right here. So as you can see, candidate 1 was actually the most preferred candidate. And candidate 3 was definitely the least preferred. And yet candidate 3 is the one who won, and candidate 1 is the one who lost. And the reason why this happened is actually mainly because this information here was not accounted for. If we are not given this information, this is actually the best guess that we can possibly have at who should win and who should lose. This actually is our best guess, just given this left side information. But that's why this information is actually not sufficient for getting a good vote, given 3 or more candidates. So there you have it. That is the ballot vote and why it doesn't make sense and how it's an extremely naive voting system, and why it definitely does work for 2 candidates, but not for 3 or more. I will see you guys later.